Hey, Nick. Hey, listeners.
Hello, Warwick.
Hello, hello.
Listen, I was doing a bit of research because we're having a few internet problems at the moment here in my abode. And I found a whole bunch of excellent names for the Wi Fi in people's homes. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
My favorite one is Connectile Dysfunction. My second favorite one was Mum, it's this one,
Oh.
which I thought was brilliant because it's something my children would do. Then we had Lord of the Pings,
Oh, gosh.
Nacho Wi Fi, Microwave,
Oh.
and Tell My Wi Fi I Love Her.
Oh, they're so accurate too, Nick. I I don't know how reliable some of this tech is these days. We seem to have ongoing issues with Bluetooth, and then you have all these fancy Wi-Fi things, and they don't always work, and you end up dragging out the old cable and plugging in to try and get around. I've got cables running across the floor here in my office permanently. Anyway, that's the way of the world, isn't it, Coxie?
It's funny how I had assumed that with the whole COVID thing, everybody had gotten really good at jumping on online meetings, and the opposite is still very true. I've got a big meeting today, as you know, that is online. And one of the participants has already reached out to tell me, and this is somebody who absolutely would have had to have used online meetings all the way through COVID because they were an essential service that I know was done via video connection. And he was telling me that he's really not quite sure whether he's going to be able to make it to the meeting because he doesn't understand the tech, and maybe I might need to give him a call and help him out,
Oh
which
my
I thought was
gosh.
hilarious. But I think it comes from the way, you and I are on media all day long. We sit in front of our cameras with our lights all day long, and stuff changes all the time. You and I really have to work actively to keep up with the changes. I can't imagine if you did a little bit when COVID was around, now trying to jump on, so much has changed. The settings
Yeah.
where you show up is different. Whether there's a waiting room or not is different. How you choose, like trying to do it on your phone is so hard. It's all just so vastly different than it was back then anyway.
And because it's the realm that you and I operate in and live in, unfortunately, we, I guess, adapt to those micro changes. But I think everything's changing for all of us in our relevant fields. But something that's never changed, Nick, is the date for Christmas.
I can't
And
say it ever changing.
well, maybe it has changed. So some history buff is going to correct me on that. Because in 1273, the date changed from sometime in February to December. I don't know. But every year, December rolls around, and every year, something you and I hear that hasn't changed, Nick, is people getting almost blindsided by Christmas, especially those in the trades. They're just
Wow.
not prepared for it.
I think it starts now. In fact, it usually starts. Then I see the uptick from about AFL Grand Final, or it used to be that AFL and rugby league were on the same weekend, and it was about then that it started. Just as we rolled to the end of September, it's warmed up. The footy season's over. We're no longer taking the kids to winter sport, and it's like we have this, from a consumer's point of view, this blinding realization that holy moly, Christmas is around the corner. Maybe it's because the stuff started showing up in the supermarkets already. And so we get a bit panicky and we start making calls. And I think that because it's still so far out, our trade business owners get caught in this situation where suddenly they have ample work, far too much work often, and they don't know how they're going to fit it in. And it all starts to feel a little bit crazy and uncomfortable. And so they take their eye off the ball. They're just busy coping with what's coming at them left, right, and center. And so it's really easy to see how they're blindsided and how we fall into these typical patterns, because I feel like it is starting to start earlier and earlier. I'm certain 1st of September, I saw some Christmas decorations in the shop or somebody posted about it. So when that's starting to happen earlier, and subconsciously as a consumer, I'm being triggered earlier, you're getting busier as a trade business owner. And suddenly before you know it, it's the 24th of December, you're scratching your head and you're falling into a burnt out heap trying to figure out how you got from A to B.
Again.
For
the 13th year in a row.
Mm.
It feels like it's one of those things, and I was having this conversation with my wife recently. For some of us, despite how hard we try and how much focus we put into changing our old patterns, or I'm a relatively new parent again after 12 years, and I got a 12-month-old. It's like some things just seem to repeat themselves as a cycle. The stuff that's come up for me as a new dad, like, man, I tried so hard to do differently this time in certain areas, and damn it, I've ended up doing the same stuff again, or getting caught out by the same things, or feeling the same stresses. And I feel like Christmas in the trades is one of those things where there are some people who are like, that's it. Next year is going to be different. I'm not going to get caught up in the rush. I'm going to push back on clients. I'm going to say this. I'm going to communicate better. And come November, it's like, here I am again. I'm under the pump and I'm manic. And what went wrong? How did I end up here again?
It just happens really quickly. And I think that's hence the reason for the 2-part pre-Christmas special. It's to remind you there's 2 things that you all stop doing every year as a business owner. Most of you, not all. I don't want to cast a great big statement over all of you. And yet we see it pretty consistently, and it leads to a lot of stress come January, February, usually March, sometimes even April. And so we want to bang you over the head with it and make you aware of it right now so you don't slip into the same hole. Today we're going to talk about one, and then next week we're going to talk about another. So be sure to tune in. This gives you a bit of buffer time so you can spend a week getting this up to date before you roll into the second one. So I think we should choose the easiest or the quickest one. Maybe it's not the easiest. Let's do the quickest one first.
You're going to have to say what it is, because I'm thinking of, hang on, I think one of these is easier and quicker than the other, but you might disagree with me, Coxie.
I think we'll be on the same page. It's a cash flow forecast.
Well, I don't think anyone's going to agree with you about that one. Like, that's freaking hard, Nick.
No, look, it feels hard, but it's quick. It's not something that's elongated that might take a fair period of time, like your marketing plan might take. Doing your cash flow forecast is kind of sit down for a solid 20, 30 minutes to get it done. And I think what holds everybody up is it's not going to be accurate. It's just going to be assumptive, and it's going to give you an indication rather than it being truly accurate. But here's the thing. As a trade business owner, unless you've got the style of business that still has emergency call-outs or some sort of work happening over the Christmas break, for the time you take off over Christmas, you don't get paid. There's no income for your business. And so we all have a cash gap that shows up later down the track, typically January, February, March, depending on how your business has performed coming into Christmas. But you will have a 1 to 2 week cash gap that shows up. If we don't identify where that is through doing something like a cash flow forecast, we fall into the gap when we get there, rather than seeing it before and making some choices around the kind of work we're doing, around the time of year we take off or how much time we're taking off in that period, around what we could do with our ordering of materials to stretch out the 30-day accounts that most of us have. Like, there's so many little choices that can be made once we understand where that hole is, to prevent it from being a great big pothole that you fall into, and instead of it just being a bit of a bump.
Can I play devil's advocate on this for a moment, Nick?
Oh, I love when you do this. Yeah, okay, let's go.
Now, this is hilarious, because I'm going to disagree with everything I'm about to say to you as the numbers nerd guy here at Tradies in Business. And the naysayers would say, yeah, but I know I'm going to have this cash gap. Why do I need to waste time doing a stupid spreadsheet to tell me that? I already know that this is going to happen.
Look, it's a fair point. And how big is the gap going to be if you know it's going to happen? Do you know when all your materials bills are due? Are there any insurance bills? What about your phone? What about all of the other outgoings that are coming out of your business? Have you had a look yet at what that looks like? Do you want to stay, we talk often about cash reserves. Do you want your cash reserves to stay the same, or do you want them to dip down significantly before they start to build up? Do you want to have control over what that looks like, or are you happy to just ride through the storm?
Okay, so here's the next part of that then. So what? So I know how big the gap is, and I know when it's going to happen. How does that actually stop it from... How do I not fall into it just because I put it on a piece of paper on your dumb spreadsheet?
That's when we get to utilize some of the strategies to make the change. So that's when we can be really clever about when we order our materials. So typically we order materials as we need them. And yet there are times when we can stretch out that order window just a little bit, so that instead of ordering it at the end of November, the last week in November, we might be able to drop it through to December, so then it's not due until the 30th of January. Or maybe we can even stretch it a bit further, or we can change the way we're working and order materials in December for work that we're going to do in January, so it's there and ready to go. We're not being caught up by the material supplier that's shut for that period of time. Alternatively, we can look at the way we stagger our leave. So maybe everybody gets 2 weeks off, but we stagger the leave. Some people get 2 weeks from Christmas, so into January, and others get leave in the middle of December through to the end of December. So we're covering a week either side with a half shift at least. So it balances out some of the cash gap. There's lots of strategies you can use so that the gap isn't quite so small. What about the type of jobs that you're doing at any particular time? Are you going to be like builders and landscapers are going to be strung out over Christmas on their payment terms? Is there a way in which they can focus on a key area so they can make a stage claim prior to the Christmas break so they're not falling into that massive cash gap that might not clear up until the end of January, which then may have a knock-on effect till February, March or April? So there's lots of strategies that we can instill in this time. And I feel like I'm preaching to the converted. It's a wonder you're not rolling your eyes at me.
I'm just making a mental list to see if you've missed anything, Nick. No, I'm only kidding. That was an arrogant wanker statement, wasn't it? So what you're telling me is I can massage the numbers a bit so that the hole is either smaller or I shift when the hole happens.
Yes, or you can stretch the hole out rather than it being all in 1 month. Like, maybe the hole that you fall into is at the end of January, or maybe you can push it out till it's the end of February because of the way we order materials or the way we stretch out those holidays, which means that, yes, the gap is still there. The gap may be marginalized or come at a time when we're more likely to have had more work come through, more cash flow, and therefore perhaps we can begin to avoid the catastrophic gap that happens for so many business owners.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll get out of disagreeable was mode here, which is hard for me to do because I'm like the arguing king in my house, unfortunately. It's not a title that I'm proud of.
It's a dreadful reputation.
Oh, I know. It sucks. Anyway, I'm just really good at it. You know when you're just good at things that you wish you weren't?
Yes.
You can't help it.
I'm trying to think of which things I'm good at that I don't.
Okay. So essentially, what we're saying here, listeners, is, and I've seen this over the years, Nick, through my various roles, even back when I was a building rep, dealing with some of my clients went broke. And as a sales rep, that was horrendous for my targets because the buggers couldn't pay their invoices.
That's right.
But in hindsight, those poor builders, they're putting orders in for white goods and stuff. And I was a white goods and kitchen rep, dealing with cabinet makers and all sorts of stuff. And this was before things got really tough, actually, back in the 90s. And it might be $1,000 gap could actually kill a business. It doesn't have to be a huge cash gap. And that's a point I'd really like to make with all of you listening to this is you don't have to have a $20,000 deficit in your cash balance to go broke. You could go broke over $500.
Yep.
Because if you can't pay someone and they go get a judgment against you, you're in deep doo-doo, as unfortunately some of you might have experienced or you're experiencing that now. And if you are, I'd encourage you to reach out and be proactive about that. Certainly get in touch with us here or talk to your accountant or your bookkeeper about it. It can be really uncomfortable to fess up about that stuff, particularly at this time of year when you are busy and it feels like just another thing you've got to deal with. But it doesn't have to be a big gap that you fall into. Like I think people have this misconception that, oh yeah, but it's only a few grand or it's only $5,000. I'll make that back. And unfortunately, Nick, you and I have seen businesses where that $5,000 was actually the straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah, it's a tough time at the moment. I think, understanding some of these things can really help you lean into what kind of work you're going to take on and balance your risk as you come into that downtime.
Yeah.
And I think it's just something that, we're not educated to do these things. It's another case of it not being your fault. It's now that you know it becomes your fault, unfortunately. Sorry, you can shoot the messenger. And you're not taught about some of this stuff when you do your trade or you start your business. That's the reason for the podcast. So we can try to make you aware of some of these areas that you fall into without realizing. There is an opportunity for your business to get into some hot water over Christmas. It's the only industry that I can think of that completely shuts down pretty well for that 2-week to 3-week break. And you deserve your break. You don't want to be stressing about money during that time. So the best thing you can do for yourself is now in October, start cash flow forecasting all the way through to the end of February or March. So you've got a really great idea. Support that up with a workflow. So what work do I normally have in, or what work have I already got booked in, so that you can really understand what it might be looking like. And then you can go out and target whatever it is that you require or do the things that are necessary to prevent it from being a hole you can't get out of.
One of which is not saying yes to crappy jobs just because it's urgent and they want it done before Christmas and you feel bad or you feel the pressure of saying yes.
Yep.
I feel like, Nick, one of the biggest things is this busyness. And we see this any time of the year when a trade business owner is hectic, under the pump, flooded with work, racing from job to job. That's when stuff goes wrong. That's when materials get missed, when rework happens, when labor hours don't get charged properly. And those things can create that $5,000 cash gap or turn a $5,000 cash gap into a $15,000 cash gap. And next minute over Christmas, you shut down, you got no way to pump money into that hole, and that can break you. So as hard as it is to resist the mania that is now, basically, as this episode goes to air coming into December, saying no to some of those jobs where your gut feeling is like, oh man, but yes, I'll come out tomorrow. Just don't do it. Don't do it. Say no. It could make the difference for you.
Yeah. So that's week 1.
Now, if you are finding it tough, if you're confused, if you don't know where to start with a cash flow forecast or anything like that, and you'd like some more info, guess what? We coach people like you. Who would have thought, Nicole, after 10 years of this podcast, that a couple of business coaches would still be coaching tradies?
No, I think we're very lucky.
So we do this stuff every day of the week. We have helped people fix these problems, prepare for Christmas, and actually take a holiday, Nick, fully funded, pay themselves their wage over Christmas and their staff.
Without stress. Yes.
Shut down. Everybody, you get a car. You get a car. That was my best Oprah Winfrey impression. It was pretty terrible. So if you want to find out how to do this, if you're confused about where to get started, jump on our website. You can book a free chat with us, 15 minutes. We'll do a quick planning session with you, point you in the right direction, get you started with a mini plan. And, hey, we might even talk to you about our program, or we might not. We might just be able to give you some free resources and help you out. There's a bunch of free training and stuff on our website as well. So head over to all the W's, tradiesinbusiness.com.au, and either grab some free stuff if you're that way inclined, or book a chat with us if you're feeling bold and you want to make some change and not get blindsided by Christmas again.
Thanks for listening.
Over.